Good morning, guys. In the last session, we completed our discussion related to Spring Boot with Angular integration. In the Angular, we are having HTTP client module. By using that HTTP client module, we can integrate our front end and back end. Good, fine. So one of our student facing some issue. Gauri Naidu, can you unmute your mic? Tell me what is the problem you are facing?
Yes, sir, I am sharing my screen.
Yeah, please share your screen.
Please give the permission, sir.
Yeah, I gave the permission.
Yes,
Share
sir.
your screen.
Sir, is my screen visible, sir?
Yes, sir, it is visible. Guys, check it. What is the issue he is facing? Yeah, Gauri, what is the problem? Did you run your application?
Yes, sir, I am running, sir.
Yeah, show me what is the issue.
This is my welcome API, sir. So when I
Okay,
click on this link, it's not working, sir.
come back. Now do one thing. Type localhost colon 9091. Directly hit that. Without this URL, go for localhost colon 9091.
With localhost 9090, it is working, sir.
Yeah, fine, sir. So the domain name issue is some people are getting that issue, no problem. You can access with this URL.
Sir, but how to resolve this domain issue, sir?
Look, sir, I will let you know that because whenever you use your system name, it is going to take as a domain name. So for some systems, it is not working. Is it your personal laptop or office laptop?
Office laptops.
Yeah, in the office laptop, it will not work, man. They will have some settings for that, so it will not work. In a personal laptop, it is working.
Okay, sir.
In the
Sir,
office laptop,
is
some settings will be there.
sir, is there any option to change this?
You will not have permission in the office laptop. In the personal laptop, you can change your system username, then the domain name will change. In the office laptop, you can't do that.
Okay, sir.
Okay,
Right.
fine.
Thank you, sir.
Anyone else having any questions, guys? Anybody else having any questions? Can you unmute your mic? Anybody having any questions? Can you unmute your mic? Anybody else having any questions? Very good, guys.
Hello, sir.
Yeah,
Sir, in our institute, data scientist course is available, sir.
currently it is not available, sir. It will start in the next month. Currently, it is not there.
Okay, sir. Actually, my brother wants to learn that course, sir.
Sure, sure, sir. It's not there currently.
Okay.
Okay, fine, guys. Now,
Sir, hello, good
yeah,
morning, sir.
yeah. Hi,
Sir,
Dhananjay. Good morning.
good morning, sir. Sir, how to explain load balancing process and interview people, sir?
So same thing, right? So when we are running our application in one server, it will get more load, then performance will become slow. So that's why we are using load balancer for our application. In the load balancer, so you can do the load balancing by using this ribbon. This is a client side load balancing, but mostly we will do the load balancing in the AWS. Server side load balancing also will be available. In the load balancer, they will create multiple virtual machines. In those machines, they are going to install our application. I mean, multiple servers will be created using multiple virtual machines. In those virtual machines, our application will be deployed. Okay, so multiple virtual machines will be created in the real time. Generally, people will go for a cloud. In that cloud, we are going to create multiple machines. In those machines, we are going to install our app. I mean, we are going to deploy our application. So whenever people access our application, request will go to that server. based on the load balancer. Load balancer will distribute the traffic to all the servers in the round robin fashion. Okay, fine. Next guys, so another important thing, that is how to unit test our REST APIs. So I have shared one video related to JUnit, but still I will discuss one example how to perform unit testing for our REST API. First of all, what is unit testing? Can anyone tell me what is unit testing now? Guys, can anyone tell me what is unit testing now? Come on guys, what is unit testing?
Unit testing can be defined as the process of testing a piece of code as a unit, that is
Yep,
the
it is the process of testing. It is the process of testing unit amount of work. It is the process of testing unit amount of work. So now in the project, we are going to create several classes and several methods. In the project, we are going to create several classes and several methods. So when we implement some coding, when we have implemented some coding, we need to test whether that code is working or not, whether that code is working or not. With the help of unit testing, we can identify the issues in the code. With the help of unit testing, we can identify issues in the code. So whatever the code you write, that code is working as expected or not, we are going to test by using unit testing. So to perform the unit testing, we will use JUnit. To perform unit testing, we will use JUnit. JUnit is an open source framework which is used to perform unit testing for Java applications. JUnit is an open source framework to perform unit testing for Java applications. Are you getting my point? What is JUnit? What is JUnit? JUnit is an open source framework which is used to perform unit testing for Java applications. JUnit is an open source framework to perform unit testing for Java applications. Okay, how to perform unit testing for one REST API? Let us see that. So unit testing is the process of testing unit amount of work. Unit testing is the process of testing unit amount of work. When we have implemented some coding, we need to test that code is working as expected or not. With the help of unit testing, we can identify the issues available in the code. With the help of unit testing, we can identify issues in the code. To perform unit testing, we will use JUnit. To perform the unit testing, we will use JUnit. What is this JUnit? JUnit is an open source framework to perform unit testing for Java applications. JUnit is an unit testing framework to perform. JUnit is a free and open source framework to perform unit testing for Java applications. Okay, now how to perform unit testing for a REST API? Let us try to understand how to perform unit testing for REST API, because in the interview they will ask you, can you write some code to perform unit testing for REST API? So let us take one simple REST API. Let us take one simple REST API and let's try to perform unit testing. Perfect. Now let me create one simple class, file, new Spring Starter project, Spring Boot JUnit app, Spring Boot REST JUnit application. Okay, web starter dev tools. I'm taking web starter and dev tools dependency. Click on next, click on finish. Web starter and dev tools dependency. Got my point?
Yeah. Excuse me, no?
Yes, sir. Fine, guys, the project got created. Now, inside this project, I'm going to create one REST controller. Inside this project, I'm going to create one REST controller. So before going to create a REST controller, let me create one service, new class. So I'm creating one class with a name called welcome service. A simple REST controller I'm creating with service layer. This class I'm representing as a service by using @service annotation. I'm representing this class as a service by using @service annotation. @service annotation. Okay. @service. Good. Now public string get message. Now string message is equal to good morning. Good morning. Now I'm going to return message. So this is a simple service class I have. Welcome service. To represent this class as a service class, we are using @service annotation. Then create a class called REST controller. REST welcome REST controller. Welcome REST controller. So to represent this class as a REST controller, I'm using one annotation @REST controller. @REST controller. Perfect. Now here we are going to inject service private welcome service private welcome service. For this we are using auto wiring. For this we are using auto wiring. Public string welcome message method. In this method I'm writing @get mapping /welcome service.get message. I'm calling service.getMessage method, which will return string message. Then return message. This is my REST controller. So this is where our service class. I represented this as a service by using @service annotation. I represented this as a service by using @service annotation, and I have taken a REST controller to represent this class as a REST controller. We are using @REST control annotation. Okay, @REST controller, and I injected welcome service, and there is a method binded to get request /welcome. Perfect. Right click, refresh, update Maven project. I just want to run this project normally, and I want to see is it working or not. If it is working, then we will perform the unit testing for this REST API by using JUnit with mocking. Now application started. Let's try to access this. Localhost colon 8080/welcome. Yes, we are able to access our REST API. Now we want to perform unit testing. Unit testing is the process of testing unit amount of work. Now you see, I created one REST controller method. That REST controller method is accessing service layer method. Here, there are two components available. One is REST controller method. Another one is service class method. There are two units available. One is REST controller method. First one is REST controller method, and the second one is service layer method. One is REST controller method, second one is service layer method. This REST controller method is dependent on service layer method. REST controller method is dependent on service layer method. Now, when we are performing unit testing, always we need to perform isolated unit testing. That means I want to test only this REST controller method, but not the service method. Can we test REST controller method without it calling the service layer method? Guys, can I test this REST controller method without executing the service layer method? No. Why? Because my REST controller method is talking to service layer method. My REST controller method is talking to service layer method. Without executing the service layer method, can I execute REST controller method? This is my REST controller. My REST controller is internally calling service layer method. So one method is dependent on the another method. What is the meaning of unit testing? Unit testing means testing unit amount of work. That means I want to perform unit testing for only REST controller method. I want to perform the unit testing for only REST controller method. So that is called unit testing. But in order to perform that unit testing, there is some dependency. In order to perform the unit testing, there is some dependency. So REST controller method is dependent on the service method. That's where we are going to use one concept called mocking. That's where we are going to use one concept called mocking. What is the mocking? Mocking is the process of creating substitute object for the real object. What is that, guys? Mocking is the process of creating substitute. Mocking is the process of creating substitute object for the real object. Mocking is the process of creating substitute object for the real object. Using mock objects, we can perform isolated unit testing. Using mock objects, we can perform isolated unit testing. So what is the meaning of mocking? Now here I will create one dummy object that is called mock object. Instead of talking to real service method, my REST controller will talk to this mock object. My REST controller will talk to mock object for unit testing purpose, because I want to test only REST controller method. My REST controller method is dependent on service layer method. I want to test my REST controller method. My REST controller method is dependent on service layer method. My REST controller method is dependent on the service layer method. I don't want to execute the real service because unit testing is nothing but only testing unit amount of work. I want to test only REST controller, but not the service. But I cannot test the REST controller without service because REST controller is dependent on the service. So in this scenario, we are going to create mock objects. What is mocking? Mocking is the process of creating substitute object for the real object. Using mock objects, we can perform isolated unit testing. Mocking is the process of creating substitute object for the real object. Using these mock objects, we can perform isolated unit testing. That means when I am going to test my REST controller method, my REST controller method will talk to mock object instead of talking to service method. That means I'm going to test only my REST controller method, not the service method. Are you guys able to understand my point? What is unit testing? Unit testing is the process of testing unit amount of work. Unit testing is the process of testing unit amount of work. It is the process of testing unit amount of work. When we implement coding, when we implement coding, we need to test that the code is working as expected or not. When we implement code, we need to test whether that code is working as expected or not. So the process of testing our code is working or not is called as unit testing. With the help of unit testing, we can identify issues in the code. That means our code is working as expected or not. Our code is working as expected or not. If the code is not working, what is the problem? Where is the problem? We should understand the problems in the code. Okay, for that we are going to perform unit testing. To perform unit testing, we will use JUnit concept. To perform the unit testing, we are going to use JUnit. What is this JUnit? JUnit is an open source framework. JUnit is an open source framework to perform unit testing for Java applications. Whenever we are performing unit testing, there is some challenges. What are those? Whatever the method we want to test, that method is dependent on some other method. Whatever the method that we want to test, that method is dependent on some other method. Okay, so when our methods are dependent on some other methods, then we need to go for mocking, because our intention is to perform unit testing for only REST controller, not for the service. That is called isolated unit testing. In order to perform the isolated unit testing, we need to create the mock objects. What is a mock object? Mocking is the process of creating substitute object for the real object. Mocking is the process of creating substitute object for the real object. Using mock objects, we can perform isolated unit testing. Okay, how to create the mock object? In the Spring Boot, we are having several annotations to perform mock objects. Okay, first, let me create one test class. Guys, see here, in the Maven project, we are having src main Java. src main Java, main Java code, main source code of the application will be available in the main Java. For testing, test Java is available. In the test Java, we need to create our test class. Let me create one class. Well, let me create one class in the REST package. Welcome REST controller test. This is the class which I am going to use as a test class for my welcome REST controller. So I have created a class with a name called welcome REST controller test. How to represent this class is a unit test class for welcome test. For that, we have one annotation called @webmvc test annotation. WebMVC test annotation value is equal to welcome REST controller dot class. So here I am using one annotation that is called web MVC test. Web MVC test annotation represents this class is used to perform unit testing for which class? Public class welcome REST controller test. Welcome REST controller test class is used to perform the testing for this REST controller. Okay, now my welcome REST controller is dependent on welcome service. So now I need to create mock object for the service. I need to create a mock object for the service, because if you see in the welcome REST controller, there is a dependent object. Now I don't want to talk to real dependent. I want to talk to mock dependent. I want to talk to mock dependent. In order to talk to that mock dependency, first I need to create the mock object. Private welcome service, private welcome service. In order to create the mock object, we are going to use annotation called mock bean. Okay, so here I'm using WebMVC test annotation. WebMVC test annotation represents. So this test class is used to test this REST controller. That REST controller is dependent on welcome service. When it is dependent on welcome service, we need to create the mock object. Okay, how to create a mock object? What is a mocking? Mocking is the process of creating substitute object for the real object. Using mock objects, I can perform isolated unit testing. I want to test only welcome REST controller method, but not the service method. So for the service method, I created mock object. Now, in order to send a request to our REST controller, we are going to use one object called mock MVC. It is a predefined class. I'm going to use auto wiring. I'm going to use auto wiring. This mock MVC object we are injecting. Mock MVC object we are injecting by using auto wide annotation. Okay, now let us try to test that by using a method. Public void welcome test. I want to test welcome method available in the REST controller. Welcome message test method. In order to represent this method as a test method, we need to write one annotation called @test annotation. @test annotation will represent this is a test case. That means this is one JUnit method. I have used WebMVC test. I have used mockbean. I used AutoWide and I used test. Test annotation is used to represent. Test annotation is used to represent. Test annotation is used to represent this is a JUnit method. Test annotation is used to represent it is JUnit method. Got my point? Test represents it is JUnit method. Mock MVC. Mock MVC is a predefined class which is used to send the request to REST controller as part of unit testing. Mockbean. Mockbean is the annotation which is used to create a mock object. What is mock object? A substitute. Instead of talking to real service method, when the real application is executing, my REST controller will talk to real service. When the real application is executing, my REST controller will talk to real service. When the unit testing is happening, my REST controller will talk to mock object. Why REST controller will talk to mock object? For isolated unit testing. My REST controller will talk to mock object for isolated unit testing. WebMVC test represents for which class we are performing unit testing. WebMVC test annotation represents for which class we are performing the unit testing. @WebMVC test value is equal to welcome REST controller, mock bean, welcome service, auto void, mock MVC, test represents it is a unit test method. It is a unit test method. Are you guys clear with these four annotations? @test, @auto void, @mock bean, @WebMVC test. Now inside this method, we should write the logic. Inside this method, we should write the logic. Now, as part of unit testing, our REST controller will talk to real service method. Our REST controller will talk to mock service method. Guys, as part of unit testing, our REST controller will talk to real service method, or our REST controller will talk to mock service method. Mock service method. For mock service, is there any behavior as of now? Mock nothing but it is a dummy. Mock nothing but it is a dummy object. Is there any behavior available for the mock object? No behavior. We need to set the behavior for mock object. That means when our REST controller calls this mock object method, what that mock object should do? When our REST controller calls this mock object method, what that mock object method should do? We need to specify behavior. When we need to write when service dot get message called, then return some message. I'm going to return as welcome to Ashok IT. Okay, this is the line where I am defining mock object behavior. That means when my REST controller calls this mock object method, what that mock object has to do, we are defining mock object behavior. When service.getMessage, then return this value. So what I'm telling, if anybody call mock object service get message method, that method should return welcome to Ashok IT as a message. Real service method will return what? Real service method will return good morning. My mock service method should return welcome to Ashok IT. Are we able to define the behavior for mock object? Are we able to define the behavior for mock object? What is the purpose of defining the behavior for mock object? What is the purpose of defining the behavior for mock object? What is the purpose of defining the behavior for mock object? My REST controller method will talk to service layer method. My REST controller method will talk to service layer method. My REST controller should not talk to real class method. My REST controller should talk to mock service method. My REST controller should talk to mock service method. So in the mock service, there is no logic. Mock object nothing but it is the dummy object we have created. If a mock object nothing but it is the dummy object that we have created. So what that mock object should do, we are defining the dummy behavior. We are defining the dummy behavior. Okay, so with this dummy behavior, we created a mock object. Using that mock object, we are defining the dummy behavior. Then we need to send the request to our REST controller. For that, we need to prepare the request object mock MVC request builders dot get. What is our REST controller URL pattern? /welcome. What is our REST controller URL pattern? /welcome. Okay, so from this test method, I am creating a request builder. I'm creating a test method. I'm creating a test method. In that method, I'm creating a request. Mock MVC request builders dot get /welcome. Mock MVC request builders dot get /welcome. Okay, now I am creating a request builder object. I'm creating a request builder object. mock MVC request builders dot get slash welcome. With this we got request builder object. Okay, once this request builder is used to create the request, now we need to send the request, right? In order to send the request, already I have taken mock MVC. Mock MVC dot perform request builder and return. Okay, see here we are having request builder. In the request builder, we told that we need to send a get request to slash welcome URL pattern. Now request is prepared. Get request I need to send to the slash welcome. That is the URL pattern of REST controller. Now, once request is created, how to send this request? Mock MVC. I already injected mock MVC. Mock MVC dot perform. Mock MVC dot perform request builder and return. Okay, so you send a request and you return the response. You send a request and you return the response. Now, mock MVC dot perform request builder and return. It is going to give us a result that is called MVC result. That is called MVC result. Once we get the MVC result, from this MVC result, we need to get the response. Whatever the response we get from the HTTP request, from the REST API is going to provide some response, right? That response we need to take and we need to validate the response. Did we get the correct response from the REST API or not? We need to validate. Based on that, we will decide our test is passed or our test is failed. First of all, are you clear with these three lines? Are you clear with these three lines? Are you guys clear with these three lines of code? Are you guys clear with these three lines of code? In the first line, I'm defining the behavior for my mock object. That means when my REST controller method call service method, what it should return. My REST controller will not talk to real service. My REST controller will talk to mock service. When service.get message, then return that value. I already defined mock behavior. Then mock MVC request builders.get slash welcome is the URL pattern. Slash welcome is the URL pattern which is used to prepare the request. Slash welcome is the URL pattern which is used to prepare the request. Sending the request. MVC result, mock MVC dot perform request builder and return. So it is going to return the MVC result, whatever we get. From this result, get the response. From this result, get the response. How can we get it? MVC result dot get response. MVC result dot get response. With this, we got the response. We got the response. From this response, we can get the status code and validate. Okay, response dot get status. Response dot get status. Okay, now set equals expected 200 actual status code we are going to specify. If request processed successfully, that means it is, if request processed successfully, that means it will return 200 as a status code. Validate response status code. I'm getting the response status code and I'm validating that response status code. Okay, look at this. This is our unit test class. This is our unit test class. So this unit test class is responsible to test which class? I am specifying WebMVC test. This test class is going to perform unit testing for welcome REST controller. My welcome REST controller is dependent on service. For that, I created mock service. So whenever we use @mockbean for this class, if you can give a interface or you can give a class also. So for this given class, a dummy mock class will be created. That is called mocking. What is mocking? Mocking is the process of creating substitute object for the real object. Using mock objects, we can perform isolated unit testing. So in the real time, when we are performing the unit testing, we will use mocking. In the real time, when we are performing unit testing, we will use mocking. Okay. So by using mock bean annotation, we can create the mock object for the service. Now, here I'm using mock MVC. Mock MVC is a predefined class in the Spring Boot test framework. In the Spring Boot test framework, mock MVC is a predefined class which is used to send the request. That's fine. I have injected mock MVC. Then I have created one test method. In that method, I'm using @test annotation. What is the purpose of @test annotation? @test annotation represents it is JUnit test method. @test annotation represents it is JUnit test method. Okay. Inside this test method, before sending the request to the REST API, first I am defining the mock object behavior. First I am defining the mock object behavior. When service.getMessage, then return welcome to Ashok IT. So when service layer getMessage method called, then it should return this message. When service layer getMessage method called, then it should return this message. Defining mock object behavior. After this, we are creating a request object. Mock MVC request builders.get/welcome. Mock MVC request builders.get/welcome. Okay, so here we are preparing the request because my REST controller method is expecting /welcome as a URL pattern. For that, I created a request object. So using that request object, I'm sending that request by using mock MVC. Mock MVC.perform request builder and return. It will prepare and send the request. So whenever we send the request, it will return MVC result. Using that MVC result, we can get the response. From the response, we are getting the status. If the response status is 200, that means it is a success. Okay, guys, fine. Let us try to run this test class, run as JUnit test. Whatever the unit test class is available, I'm running this JUnit test class and see what will happen. Is that a test success or is that text failure? Let us see this. Guys, now see, test is executed successfully. Test is a success or test is a failure. Test is a success or test is failure. Test executed successfully or a test is failed to execute. Come on, guys. Our test executed successfully. That means we are able to implement unit testing for our REST controller. So from this test class, we are able to send the request to /welcome. /welcome, that REST controller method return 200 status code. That is the reason our test got passed. Let me show you in the debugging mode. How exactly it is calling that. Now right click, debug as JUnit test. Now this REST controller is, this test class is really calling our REST controller or not. In that REST controller, it is calling real service or dummy service. Let us see. There is a breakpoint. There is a breakpoint in the REST controller. Open your service layer variable. Guys, now in this REST controller method, I'm calling service.getMessage. In the service variable, real service object available or mock service object available. Can you check it? In the 13th line, variable is there. In that variable, I'm keeping my mouse cursor. It is displaying that variable holding which class object. That variable is holding which class object. That variable is holding which class object. It is holding real service object. It is holding mock object. That means into this REST controller, welcome service injected or welcome mock service injected. In our REST controller, real service object injected or mock service object injected. Come on, guys. Mock object injected. How can we say that mock object injected? How can we say mock object injected? How can we say that mock object injected? Yes, at the time of debugging, we can see what are the values. We now see message variable holding. Message variable is holding good morning or welcome to Ashok IT. If a real service is executed, good morning should come. But actually in this variable, what message available? Welcome to Ashok IT. That means mock object method is getting injected into REST controller. So whenever we are performing the unit testing, we will use mock objects to perform isolated unit testing. Are you guys clear with my point? Are you guys clear with my point? How we will perform unit testing for the REST controller? Unit testing is the process of testing unit amount of work. Unit testing is the process of testing unit amount of work. When we implement code, we need to test whether that code is working as expected or not. With the help of unit testing, we can identify issues in the code. To perform unit testing, we will use JUnit. What is this JUnit? JUnit is an open source and free framework. JUnit is an open source and free framework to perform unit testing for Java applications. What is mocking? Mocking is the process of creating substitute object for the real object. Using mock objects, we can perform isolated unit testing. Okay, now I'm going to give you this code. So first I have created one welcome service, guys. This is my welcome service. After that, we created welcome REST controller. Welcome REST controller is dependent on welcome service. Now, in order to test this, I have created one test class. Inside this test class, all the logic is available. Inside this test class, all the logic available. REST API unit testing. REST API unit testing. Now look at the annotations once again. WebMVC test, mock bean, auto wiring, @test. WebMVC test represents for which class you are performing unit testing. Mock bean represents for which class you want to create the mock object. Auto wide represents dependency injection. right? At the rate test, it representing it is a unit test method. So this method is working as a unit test method. In this unit test method, I want to send a request to the REST controller and I want to test it. So in order to send a request to the REST controller, first we need to define the behavior for mock object. So here I have defined the behavior for mock object. Then I prepared the request by using request builder. To which method we want to send the request, what type of request we want to send, that we have defined by using request builders.get slash welcome. Request builders.get slash welcome. Once the request is prepared, mock MVC.perform request and return. Here I'm going to send the request. I'm getting the result. From the result, I'm getting the response. From the response, I'm getting the status. That status I'm comparing with the expected status. I'm expecting 200. What is the actual? If expected and actual are matching, then test is passed. Otherwise, the test is failed. So how to verify expected result and actual result are matching? To verify expected result and actual result, we are using set equals. We have verified expected result and actual result by using asset equals. We verified. Got it? Isolated unit testing means when we are testing one method, we need to focus only on that method testing, not the dependent methods. I want to test my REST controller. We need to focus only on the REST controller methods testing, not on the dependent methods. That is called isolated testing. That is called as isolated testing. Perfect. I have already given you a video also in the JUnit workshop video. We have given the JUnit workshop video also, and today I have explained one example. How can we perform unit testing for REST API? So please practice this unit testing with REST API. In the interview, they will ask you this question: how you will perform unit testing for REST API? You should be able to write this piece of code. So this is the process we are going to follow to perform unit testing for REST API. Okay, cool. In the tomorrow session, we will discuss what is OAuth security, how to implement OAuth in the Spring Boot. That I will explain in the tomorrow session. Okay, guys. So before coming to tomorrow session, you also do some research on what is OAuth so that easily you can understand. Before coming to tomorrow session, you can do some research on what is OAuth. You can understand. For JWT, I have given the video already, Mr. Amit. For the security, I have given 3 videos. In that one video is JWT. So please go through that. Tomorrow I will give some light for JWT as well. Okay. Thank you guys. We'll meet in tomorrow session. Tomorrow we'll discuss about OAuth security. Thank you. Have a great day. We'll meet in tomorrow session.